All right, welcome back. This is the Coach Mark Gottfried Show. And boy, I've always said this. I've had amazing guests, some incredible people, highly, highly successful. And today I have the opportunity to have a guest that she's not only a great basketball coach, but sincerely when I say this, probably one of the people I respect the most and cheer for the most, and go all the way back when Joni Crenshaw, who's now the head coach at Texas A&M, when she was a player for the University of Alabama. And Joni, I'm pumped. I'm thrilled that I can get you on the show today. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I feel like this conversation was it's long overdue. Like, we always stay in touch, we always connect, but I've always just learned so much from you. I always enjoy our conversations, and so I'm excited to visit with you today. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Joni. So we're going to dive in a little bit to your background and story, but just to give everybody a little bit of a background, when I was the head coach at Alabama, Joni was finishing up her playing career, and Joni was a really good player for the University of Alabama. And then when she had 1 year, her eligibility had expired, and you had that 1 year to graduate, you came and helped out in our office on the men's side. And so we really got to know you there. And then from there, you got into coaching and all the steps along the way. But man, Joni, I remember those days, and I remember watching you play, and I loved watching you play because you're a really good player. So how about that? How about the fact most people don't realize that you came and worked in our office with us there for a year? How about that one?
That's when I realized I wanted to be a coach. I didn't want to coach. I was getting my degree in secondary education. And so I came back a fifth year so I could student teach. And that was also the year Mal Moore was the AD, and he implemented a new rule that if you were still on scholarship but not playing, you had exhausted your eligibility, that you had to put in 20 hours a week somewhere in the athletic department. And I'll never forget Darren Boatwright, who was your Dobo at the time. He came over to me and said, "Hey, you want to work in our office?" And I said, "Heck yeah." I mean, I was babysitting for you from time to time. I was helping I used to babysit Johnny Jones' kids from time to time. I used to hang out with Darren and Cheney. So I felt like I was already on your team. I'll never forget when you got the job. You came my sophomore year. We were so excited to have you there. And so I said, of course. And that's when I caught the coaching bug. That's when I fell in love with being a coach. And so I tell everybody, like, I owe you and Darren Boatwright for being where I am now, because I would have not been coaching if I had not worked in your office in my fifth year.
Well, Joni, we loved having you, and it wasn't a situation where you kind of filled a spot. Like, we really wanted you to be a part of everything we were doing because we had so much respect for you as far as who you are and at your core. And then when you got into coaching, Joni, I was always excited for you because what I believe sometimes is, and especially in any walk of life, but really in our profession in coaching, you had the opportunity to really learn from some amazing coaches, like a highly, highly successful, and you had that experience under you. Talk a little bit about that and kind of who those people were, and, how you began to develop your own philosophy as a result of some of the great coaches you worked with and worked for.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I mean, man, so when I left you my fifth year, I immediately went to Troy University and worked for Mike Murphy, who was my position coach at Alabama. He had just gotten the job at Troy. And so to be able to go to a Division I school in a state that I was comfortable with, working for someone who was my position coach, there was a whole lot that I did not know, but I knew him. And I knew his philosophy. And so it gave me an immediate comfort and confidence with those young people that I was responsible for helping to become really good basketball players. And after being there for 3 years, I went to Louisiana Tech, and Chris Long was my boss, and I learned a lot from him. He was a high school coach in Mississippi when I played in Mississippi, so he was familiar with me. He invested a lot in me. But while I was in Ruston, Louisiana, I also developed a great relationship with Leon Barmore, who was the all-time winningest coach in Louisiana Tech history. He still lives there to this day, but he came around. He was very invested in the program, and he took a liking to me. And so I can't say that I saw him every week, but I saw him often. And the conversations that I had with him, the moments that he shared with me, the nuggets he gave me, just did so much for me, and just how I thought about the game, how I worked. I was also a little bit scared of him. And so I didn't want to disappoint him. I left there and came back to Alabama and worked for Wendell Hudson. You were still obviously at Alabama at that time. And so I worked with Wendell for 2 years, and Wendell was a great coach, but he was also a really good businessman because he had been on the administrative side. And so he thought as an administrator, he operated as a businessman. And so that was a side of the game that I had not seen and had not been exposed to. And so I really learned a lot from him as well in terms of how administrators think and how they move and how they navigate our sport, the entire athletic department. And so I'm just constantly like packing all these nuggets away from all these different experiences. And then went to LSU and worked for Van Chancellor, all-time winningest coach at Ole Miss, 3-time world champion of the Houston Comets of the WNBA. Man, you talk about someone who's really good in time and score situations. And so I really got to watch him in those, 2 minutes left, call a timeout. We couldn't advance the ball then. We still had 20-minute halves, but he was excellent with the clipboard, just excellent drawing up plays. And he also knew how to delegate and give responsibility to his assistants. And so I learned how to delegate and also how to start thinking about what I wanted to be responsible for. At that time, I knew I wanted to be a head coach, but I knew I wasn't ready. And so I really started paying attention and started thinking through, like, whenever I have a shot, like, how am I going to delegate? What am I going to do? Even in game, like, am I going to sub? Is somebody else going to sub? Am I going to do time and score? Will somebody else do that? And watching him gave me the confidence. Here's a Hall of Fame coach who very easily sat down and let other people take responsibility for things and coach. And so I learned that from him and was really fortunate to work for Andy Landers for 4 years at Georgia. I tell you what, like, he is a dear friend of mine. I love him like a second father. And the way he poured into me and truly handed me the keys to that program when he could run it in his sleep. While I was with Coach Landers is when they passed that you could practice in the summer, like legitimately practice. And he said, it's yours. The summer is yours. They don't need to hear my voice all summer and then hear my voice all year long. Number one. And number two, it'll give you a chance to figure out who you are as a coach. Like, what's your style? How are you going to implement? What's your coaching? It'll let you have your coaching voice. And so for 3 summers, I ran the program. I made every decision for our program as an assistant coach. And so the confidence he gave me and the things I learned from him really just put a bow on who I was going to be as a coach. And so I am grateful. I'm grateful to have worked for people who invested in me, who believed in me. And all while I'm working for them, I've got you texting me, and I've got Jim Foster texting me, and Gino and Dawn Staley and Vivian Stringer. So the people who were champions that I didn't directly work for, but was able to be around and who poured into me, I could go on and on. I've had a really not easy path, but I'm grateful for the path that I had, and I'm grateful for the people who saw something in me and who continue to pour into me.
Well, one thing with you, Joni, your character has always stood out. And I think when you're coaching, the basketball side of things is important because we all have to be good at what we do. But then, I think what's happened over the years for you, Joni, and you've done a great job is, people see your character. They see who you are as a person. They trust you and they know what you're about. And so you've had some amazing moves. So, one question I want to ask you and just kind of talk through it, because when I was a young coach and, I went from UCLA to Murray State for 3 years, in my mind, I always was drawn, back because I had played at Alabama, like, man, I'd love to be the coach there one day. And, now that I'm older, I look back, I had 11 great years. I loved it. It was wonderful and, all that. But my mind was so focused on that, where I've seen you kind of, you've been from Georgia to A&M, and here's Alabama sitting out there, and they've had some coaching changes a couple of times. And has that ever been a draw for you, or what's your? And I know it's a little bit, difficult maybe to say because you're coaching at A&M, but for me that was there. But for you, is that part of your thought process at all? I think for me,
I love Alabama, right? It is where I met some of my greatest friendships and relationships as a player. I joined a sorority. Coach Moody is someone who I still talk to all the time. I give back. I love Alabama. I think I got that out of my system when I went back to work for Wendell as an assistant coach. And so I wanted to be back at Alabama so bad. And so when I went there for those 2 years that I was with Wendell, I was able to get that feeling that you're talking about out of my system. Since then, for me, the Alabama job has not come up. And so I think my process as it relates to where I want to be in terms of where I want to coach and how I want to lead people there's some deal breakers that I have. And that's how I guide, and Darius and I sit down and guide like the decisions we're going to make in terms of the program that we're going to be a part of. And so I think that's not hovering in my mind. Number one, Christy Curry is doing an amazing job, and I'm excited for what she's been able to do there. And also I got it out of my system when I went back to work for Wendell.
How about this one, Joni? Because, as a on the guys' side, on the men's side, I'm at Alabama, and the football, the enormity of football, the interest in football is so big. And, I probably in my last 2 or 3 or 4 years, I've said this a lot, I got real grumpy, towards that. We were winning, we had been number one in the country. We're going to the Elite Eight, and, I can't get new carpet in my locker room, and I'm looking across the street, and, football, and I didn't handle it very well. But for you, now you've been the women's coach basically at big time, powerful football schools. And so for you, how do you see that? How do you view that as far as your program? Because football, is obviously really big at the schools you've been at.
It is. I think the first thing I understand, and I'm fortunate to have gone to Alabama as a student athlete, and what you're describing when you were the coach at Alabama is what we felt as student athletes, right? And obviously football is really big in the South. It's really big in the SEC, and football funds our program. So I think having gone through that as a student, I understood what I was walking into when I made the decision to stay in the SEC. Right. And for me, the other thing that has really I've been fortunate is that my sport administrators, like the people who have been my direct sport administrator, have been very strong women who played basketball or who have been in administration for a really long time. And so they have a voice, and they have been great advocates for me in our women's basketball program. I think also I'm very intentional about the schools that I choose. Like, yes, Georgia is a football school, but it's also a basketball school. It's also an equestrian school and a track and field school. Like I wanted to look at how are we funding other sports? How are we funding Olympic sports? Is women's basketball important? Is women's sports important? And so there are some schools in our league that I have said no to because I did not feel that we would be supported the way we needed to be. And so it's intentional, it's strategic, but I've also been fortunate to have great advocates and administrators and athletic directors who believe you can do both well.
Joni, if we were to go way back to when you were little, and my daughter, hell, you babysat her, but long legs, tall, thin. Everywhere she went when she was younger, she got the question, and probably too, because I was a coach, was, do you play basketball? Because she was a tall, tall girl. I think every tall girl when they're, well, thank you, but and getting ready to have a baby, going to have a baby here in the next week.
Goodness.
So can you imagine that from little bitty Mary Lacy?
That makes me feel old. Oh, she's going to be beautiful. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. So for you growing up, you're from Meridian, Mississippi, and the hometown of one of my teammates, Derek McKee, who played 15 years in the NBA. But for you growing up, here you are. I'm just guessing right now that you were tall and probably taller than most of the other girls. But for you, the passion to play basketball, where did that come from?
My dad and my mom both played. My dad played at Natchez Junior College, and before he went on to finish his college career, my mom played in high school. Now, my mom, I have to put this asterisk by it because she played when only two people could cross half court, and they were rovers, right? So that's taking it way, way, way back. But we had a basketball goal everywhere I lived growing up, and my mom and dad both put a ball in my hands. And one of the things my dad strategically did was he didn't put me on like a a rec league team until like I was ready. He taught me in the backyard. He'd take me out there. I was the only girl in the neighborhood. And so I played football, I played baseball, I played all the sports the guys played. I was the only girl in our entire neighborhood. So I was a tomboy growing up. So I just fell into it because I wanted to be where my brother was and he was playing. So I played, and my dad continued to push that. And I tell you, I didn't even know that you could get scholarships to play basketball until I was like in 6th grade, 7th grade. And one of our family members called, and they had a friend who was driving to Tuskegee on a basketball scholarship. And she was going to stop and spend the night at our house to split up her drive. She was driving from Natchez, Mississippi. And so when she came, I asked her, I said, well, why are you going to Tuskegee? And she said, I'm on a basketball scholarship. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, you can go to school for free to play a sport? And that was an aha moment for me. And from that moment on, that was my goal, because my parents weren't going to be able to pay for me to go to college, right? They're school teachers. And my brother was 1 year older than me. And so they were going to have 2 kids in college at the same time. And so that became my driving force and my passion behind it.
Was you looking back, Joni, was there, we all have different lessons we've learned, from being an athlete, and you were a really good athlete, obviously enough to play in the SEC and be a really good player at Alabama. But if you look back and, now that we're older, and I'm obviously a lot older than you, but if you could grab onto one of the two or three of those things you learned growing up and playing basketball that kind of helped form, some of your values, like what would those be for you that you learned that you kind of still carry with you all the way through your life?
One of the things that my high school assistant coach, Vicki Hood, she played at Mississippi State. And so she had been where I was trying to go. And she pushed me in high school probably harder than I thought she should have, right? I was grateful for it. I never said that to her, but I always felt like, man, she is giving it to me, right? And then I don't know where it came from, but one day I thought, wow, if she's demanding this of me and asking this of me, then she must think I can do it. And I don't want to disappoint. And I was always the child. I'm still that person who I don't want to disappoint. There's a quote from Maya Angelou that says, I'm counting on you, counting on me. And so that's how I operate. I operate in the sense of like, one day you're going to need me. And when you need me, I'm going to be ready. And that has been what really drives me to work hard as a player, to push through. Coach Murphy used to always tell me when we were training, he was like, hey, you'll pass out before you die. And so that's something else that in my warped sense in my mind, I always used to think when I was tired, I didn't think I could take another step or run any more laps around the track with TJ. It was always, you'll pass out before you die, and they'll get you in an ambulance and you'll be all right. And so I'm fortunate that I always got pushed really hard. And I think that is to an extent how and what shaped me to be the driver that I am now, the one who has high expectations now, because they were put on me. And what I found out was that I could handle it. And the people who are under my charge now can handle it too. And so that, more than anything, hard work has really just shaped a lot of how I do things, and not wanting to disappoint. I don't ever want you to call me and I let you down. And so whatever that means, I'm going to try to be as ready as possible.
Wow. Joni, it reminds me, and what you're saying, and kind of that whole, your values and how you built your values. But, Corey Close, the head women's coach at UCLA, is a good friend of mine. Corey used to babysit my kids too.
Oh, wow.
So
Corey's a great friend of mine. I didn't know that.
I know. So when I was at UCLA, Corey was an assistant on the women's side, and she actually lived out where I did out in Calabasas. And so we actually 2 days a week, we played 6 a.m. full court basketball, but we would ride in together with her and Lorenzo Romar, myself. And I always loved how curious she was. She just was always asking questions. She's always trying to, find something out. And even back then as a young coach, she was just so curious. It's like, well, how do you guys do this? Well, what about this question? And, she's firing them in the car every morning. And then I followed her career too. But, Corey shared with me a story that you and her were coaching together. I want to say it was with USA Basketball, and Corey's father passed away. And she, to this day, tells me that you, were her rock. Like you were there for her, like in a difficult time. And it just speaks of who you are, Joni, and your character. But, do you remember that happening with you and Corey in that time period, and how she told me how meaningful you have been to her in her life?
You're going to make me cry. Listen, Corey, number one, is a phenomenal person. She is a dear friend. I will do anything for her. She is one of those people who it's like anytime, anywhere, right? But she gives me more credit than I deserve in that regard. Corey was the rock. Like, if you did not know Corey's father was in transition, you would not know it. And because Corey is a driver and a pusher and is someone who is uncommon and demands excellence, she probably felt that she was off because she knew what she was going through, but nobody else would have known. Corey was excellent during that time. Her father did pass away while we were there. And she knew that could possibly happen. So she said her goodbyes before she left. And she also made the decision with her family that if he did pass away while she was gone, she would not return. Unbelievable. I learned from Corey during that moment. And so she says, I've heard that story before. She gives me more credit than I deserve. I'm the one who learned from her during that time. She was present. She was prepared. Not one time did her voice ever quiver, shake, or falter in front of those young people who we were coaching. It was like having an out-of-body experience watching her lead, knowing what she was going through during that time. Unbelievable. And it forced me to answer some tough questions. If I were in this situation, what would I do? If I got a phone call like that, what would I do? Would I still be prepared? Would I still be ready to go? She helped me in that moment.
She's amazing. And one thing I've always respected about her, and I respect this about you too, Joni, is that, coaching can be difficult at times. Coaching, there's a lot of pressure to win. And I put my foot in a bear trap a couple of times, and it's not fun. But, one thing I enjoy about both of you is that your faith is, it's evident as a part of who you are. Like when I'm with Corey, there's no mistake in that part. It's there. And it doesn't mean she's perfect, but I've always felt that about you too, Joni. Your faith, I think, because your character and your values, they're built on something. And for you, I would guess, because I've known you so long, that's a part of who you are as well.
It definitely is. I've always been a huge believer. I grew up in the church. I'm fortunate to have parents who put me and my brother in church at a really young age, and it just became a part of who we are. But, when you get out of the house, then your faith becomes yours to carry, right? Before, my mom and dad made sure we got there. And then when I got to college, it was, all right, you've been here for a month and you haven't been to church. What are we doing? And so I was fortunate to find a really good college home in Tuscaloosa, and then that just continued all the places that I was. But my relationship with God is everything to me. And the older I get, the more I realize how weak I am and how much I need him. And one of the things that has been a surprise but a bright spot for me coming to Texas is how openly I can talk about my faith without fear of getting in trouble for it, just from a school standpoint, or praying in public, or praying at team meetings or gatherings. That was something that you kind of had to be careful of at some of the other places and institutions I worked at. And to be here and to openly be able to share the gospel with people who want to talk about that, and in my speeches and just in my conversations, has been something that I have truly, truly enjoyed and am grateful for. The one thing I'll always say is, if someone ever asks a player that I coached, am I a believer? I don't want them to ever have to wonder. They can ask a lot of things about me, but if they ever ask, was Coach a Christian? Was Coach a believer? That is not anything I ever want them to have to hesitate on. Oh, absolutely. Yes, she was.
Yeah.
Yes, she is.
Wow.
I want to tell you a
Powerful.
story really quickly too. You asked me kind of like what drives me, what shapes me. And I was talking about not wanting to disappoint and just under pressure performing and all those things. And I'll go back to when I was working with you, my 5th year at Alabama. That was also the year of 9/11. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, that's also like heavy recruiting, right? That's when you can go into the homes and do home visits. There's a contact period. You can go to these high schools. And so the month of September is like, go from here to here to here to here to here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget sitting in the office. We were all watching the TV, crying our eyes out, like this is not happening. And you were in the Birmingham airport and your flight had been canceled because of what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you call back to the office and Carla answered the phone and you asked, was everybody okay? And then Pat told Carla to hand us the phone. And I cannot remember the other young lady who was in there with us as a student worker. I think it was Brooke, but
That's right.
you said, hey, this is a tragic situation that's happened. You know, we're going to pray for everybody. We're going to pray for our country. I'll be back there in about 45 minutes to an hour. And I've got to figure out how to, Carla has my calendar, get my calendar. And every place that I was going to be by plane, I've still got to get there. So you guys figure out how I'm going to get there by car, train, bus. And when I get there in about an hour, hour and a half, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about it. And I remember thinking, let me draw my, okay, but it did something to me in that moment, like to say, yes, this is unbelievable what we're going through. The pandemic was unbelievable in 2020 that we were going through, but we still had to function. As a leader, you still had to take care of your team. You had to account for the people who worked with you. You had to account for your players and your prospects and your recruits. There was still a job to do.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I learned that in that moment. I still have a job to do to help you figure out how you're still going to be the head coach at Alabama and get your job done in such an awful time. And that is something that shaped me. It really pushed me to want to do what you do. And even now, I drew on that so much during the pandemic when we were shut down. Yes, this is awful. And we're losing people, and we don't have our players. Our players are all over the country. We don't know where they are. They're not with us. But we still have a job to do. And that's something that you taught me in that moment.
Wow. Joni, thank you for that. I remember, I don't remember that I had the impact, but I do remember that time. So thank you for sharing that. You know, our players, Joni, the basketball players on the men's side at Alabama, and I know you're close to a lot of these guys, you know, the Irwin Dudleys and Antoine Petways, and, you know, those guys, they have amazing stories. But and Antoine Petway, who's now the head coach at Kennesaw State, and you know he's a superstar on the rise. You know, it's
Absolutely.
His time is coming, and you know he's just I think about him. He makes me cry half the time because I'm so proud of him. But a lot of people don't know. Maybe even people in Alabama that'll be listening to this is I think I have this right. I might be wrong, but I'm gonna go for it right here. If I can remember, I think you might have introduced Antoine to his wife.
I did.
Or did you? See, I got
they
that
met
right.
on my couch in my apartment in Bryce Lawn Apartments.
I knew that. How about that?
Absolutely. Kim and I were, Jamila Andrews, who was my teammate, her and Jamila were cousins. And so I first met Kim through Jamila. And then they were at the house, and Kim and I later pledged a sorority together, Delta Sigma Theta. And she lost her mom while we were in college. And that was just another person who was a rock, and seeing her handle all that and put herself through college. But her and Petway met on my couch. And, you know, we are dear friends to this day. I love her kids like they're my own.
Yep.
And to watch Petway, I've been able to go to practice and to see Coach Pearson there with him now. And I've been able to watch a game. It's just the passion he has. He's so passionate about it. He's such a great recruiter. I think we all knew that. But to now be able to show what he can do as a coach and the staff he's put around him, it's just been amazing to now call him at 5 a.m. and say, hey, what are you watching? What are you doing? I watched your time and score last night. Let's talk about it. It just is.
Wow.
It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
I was so proud this past year. He had a team that came out to California, and I went and sat right behind the bench. And, I watched how the players respond to him, too. They you can tell right away there's trust, there's love, there's passion, there's a bond there. You can just watch and see how the players respond. And I'm sure yours are that way, too. So, Joni, let me ask you this, because I was able to coach a Pan Am team one year with USA Basketball, and we went down to Rio de Janeiro, and Jay Wright was our head coach. I was the assistant coach. But for you, you've had a number of opportunities with USA Basketball. Talk a little bit, because I know how it felt for me, when you walk out there, on that court, and you got those 3 letters across your chest, USA. But just talk about the experiences you've had, because you've been a part of a lot of teams that have done really, really well with USA Basketball.
My USA Basketball is my second basketball family. I love them. I've spent the last 4 summers in Colorado or in Vegas or, London, Paris with the national team. Like, I have had great moments with them and great experiences. And that staff is like a second family, and those players, like, to get a chance to coach some of the best players in the world at all levels is something that I think all coaches would love to be able to do. So I'm fortunate. My first stint with USA Basketball was 2018. I was an on-court coach, and Jeff Walls at Louisville was the head coach, and Corey Close and Latasha Adair were the assistant coaches, and I was just the on-court coach, which meant you got to come to tryouts, but that was it. That's where your journey stopped. And for me, I've kind of always consider that to be kind of like your tryout process, with USA Basketball. And then everything shut down with the pandemic. Corey Close was going to be the head coach for the 18 and under team and the 19 and under team, but we skipped 18 and under in 2020. So I was her assistant coach in 2021, like we talked about. And immediately after that, I became the head coach for 18 and under. And so I was able to do that in 2022. And that was also the first year that I got involved with the national team. They asked me to be an on-court coach for the national team that year, and I came to the Final Four, and Cheryl Reeves was already named as the Olympic coach in 2024, and so I got to be with her and her staff. And then that fall, I got invited to Australia to be a part of the World Cup, and that's the first qualifier for the Olympics. And so that was my first opportunity to be on her staff and, be with the team that potentially was going to be the Olympic team, that national team. And then in 2023, I coached the 19 and under team to a gold medal. And then last summer, I again returned to the national team and was an assistant coach along with Mike Thibault and Carol Lawson to Cheryl Reeve for the Olympics in Paris. And so, again, just it's such great moments and memories, and the games are special. But you think about those times when you're in the film room or when you're trying to figure out the other team and what you're going to run and who we need to get touches for. Those are the moments that I remember when you're just really hashing it out, talking basketball, and to be on the world stage and watch other countries play and still a little bit of what they do. The international game is growing and growing fast, and there's a lot of really good players out there. So it also professionally was a great way for me to develop and continue to stretch myself and grow. We obviously have a lot of players at A&M who want to play in the WNBA and overseas, and so we have really transitioned our offense to more of a pro style so that when they have the opportunity, the transition is easier for them. So being around it, our terminology is the same. The actions we run is the same. And our players who are now in the league have had success and sustained success in the league and overseas, in my opinion, because number one, they're really talented and they work hard, but also because their transition was smooth because of some of the changes we started to make as I got more involved with USA Basketball.
When you coached with USA Basketball, Joni, and I think you'll be the head coach of the Olympic team at some point. But when I was with USA Basketball, and even though it was the Pan Am Games, it wasn't the Olympics, but I still felt a little bit, and I know Jay Wright, as our head coach, did, that there's a little bit of like an underlying pressure because we expect the United States, we just expect it that we're going to win. Like, we're going to dominate. We're the best. We're the best in the world. And did you feel a little bit of that, maybe kind of underline, like, hey, the world is watching. We're on the biggest stage as far as, an Olympic stage, but some of that pressure with being involved with the USA team.
Right. Well, I mean, we've all seen the Redeem Team documentary, right? Like, that I don't want to be on that documentary. Like,
No. Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of that. But yes, there is no plan B. Like, there's one plan, and that is to win a gold medal. That is it.
Yep.
That is the only
That's
conversation we are having. And everything you do points in that direction. I think what a lot of fans and the public don't understand is my statement before, how close the international game has gotten to our game. I mean, think about all the pro players in the NBA and the WNBA who are overseas, right? We have 5 international kids on our roster right now. And I think the other thing that as fans we don't always understand is you go try out, you have a 2-day tryout twice a day, and then you pick 12 players, men or women, who have never played together, or in some cases, a couple of them have, or they're familiar with each other. And then you have about 5 days to practice. And then they put you on a plane and you start your journey to win a gold medal. When for a lot of other countries, they're with their national team year round, or there's the Australia Institute of Sport. There's things that keep those teams together. And so the continuity that we're trying to develop in a 5 to 6 day window, some of these other countries, what they lack in talent, they have in continuity, and they have in culture and in relationship and in familiarity that we're trying to figure out and form. And so sometimes when you see those games that are people think should be blowouts, they don't understand, like, we've practiced twice and we're playing this game, or we've had 3 practices and we're playing this game, and these other teams have played together. And you can see it, the way they move and cut and play with each other. They've been playing together for a really long time. And so that's the other dynamic that we're also, trying to figure out as we continue to play and practice, is that hopefully our continuity and our culture and our familiarity catches up to everybody else's, and then our talent's going to take care of the rest. But there's a whole lot of dynamics that the world doesn't know when they're just watching the game.
100%.
And also that nobody's cheering for us but the USA. Like, every other country wants us to lose, right? And so you also have this other underbelly that's not talked about, of like some of the things that happen when you go to these foreign countries and the bus is 30 minutes late, but only for USA, or the balls disappear. There's things that happen that don't seem to happen for other countries. And it's because we're the team that everybody wants to cheer against, unless you are from the United States.
There's no question. You said that well. Joni, how have you, as a high profile Division I, high level, coach, how have you handled the transition with all of what's new now in college sports? When you played, the NCAA rules were obviously way different.
Yeah.
When you coached early on in your career, completely different. And then all of a sudden, boom, kind of, it was coming. And, I coached Ed O'Bannon for 5 years at UCLA, and I was very close, with everything going on with all of the lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. But here comes NIL, name, image, and likeness. And, it was meant for true name, image, and likeness, like Johnny Football at Texas A&M. He missed an opportunity to make money when he was in college, probably bigger than he was. That was when he was at the most prominent point of his career. Yeah. And so, but now NIL has changed into complete pay for play. And then you have the portal on top of that. So how have you transitioned and handled that? Because that is a completely different landscape now than it was years and years ago when you first started to coach.
It has become a lot more transactional.
Yeah.
And I want relational and transformational. And so for me, the blending of both is what I have held on to. I do believe players should get paid for their name, image, and likeness in the true form of what it was meant to be. It has turned into something else, and we've got to figure out how to corral that in some shape or form. But I don't know about you, but I've tried to put toothpaste back in the tube, and that's pretty hard to do. So I don't know how we're gonna get it corrected. I think the other thing that I will say is, about 8 years ago, I was challenged to be on our Women's Basketball Coaches Association Board of Directors. And I was like, absolutely not. I just want to coach my team. We're not at a point. This was when I was at Georgia. I think I was going into year 3 of being a head coach. And I was like, I'm new. I'm a baby in this thing. And Coquise Washington was the one who walked up to me and challenged me to do it. And she said, Our game needs you. Our game needs minority representation. And she also said, you were an assistant coach for 13 years and you've been a head coach for 2. You've put 15 years in this game and you've come to the Final Four and you've come to things and you've sat in on seminars and you've learned a lot. You've been a taker, which is what you're supposed to be early in your career. And now it's time for you to be a giver. It's time for you to be a servant and give back. So you need to serve on this board of directors. And what do you say to that? She's absolutely right. And you talk about a gut check. And so I said yes. And in doing that, I'm still on the board. I'm now vice president of the WBCA, but I've also served on some other committees. And being on those committees has honestly given me a bit of a head start as to what's coming down the road. And so it has given me a chance to wrap my mind around, if this happens, how am I going to navigate it? How is it going to affect women's basketball? How is it going to affect our program specifically? And so it's given me a bit of not a cheat sheet, but a head start in terms of how I want to approach some things. And that has helped me tremendously. And I've called some people who are out of the box thinkers. There's a lot of really out of the box thinkers in our game. And on the men's side, Villa 7 was great for me in that regard because I was able to be a part of that as an assistant coach. And Villa 7 puts you in a room with men's assistant coaches as well. And a lot of those men's assistants are now head coaches themselves. And so I feel like I can reach across the aisle and call a lot of men's coaches and get some ideas on how to think outside of the box and how they're handling things. And so all those things, Coach, have been what has allowed me to kind of hold true to who I want to be as a coach, but also adapt and be fluid with all the change that is now a part of our game.
Yeah. Yep. You know, Joni, when I look back and we mentioned guys like Erwin Dudley and Richard Hendricks and Antoine Petway, the guys at Alabama, Alonzo G, all these guys, you know.
Richard and Hendricks interviews me now. That is so crazy, by the way. He's interviewing me.
And he's good. I'm so proud of him. He's doing a great job. You know, but I look back and I tell people this all the time, and you're going to be able to understand this completely as a coach. You know, I had guys, you know, Chuck Davis for 4 years, but I also recruited those guys for 2 or 3 years before they came to Alabama. So now, you know, I have a 6 or 7 year, you know, window of a relationship with them that now those guys are in their 40s and there's still a bond there because, you know, we had that length of time and, you know, guys, because, you know, if you transferred back then, you had to sit out a year. And, you know, guys like Chuck Davis, who didn't play as a freshman, Ernest Shelton, he barely played. He averaged 1 point a game and, you know, ended up becoming a really, really good college player. Those guys would have went in the portal. They've already told me, oh, Coach, I'd have been out of there. You know, I would have just went somewhere else because I wasn't playing as a freshman.
Right.
But I think we've lost. It breaks my heart a little bit because I love the fact guys can get paid. I'm for it, all that kind of stuff. But we're losing that bond maybe that we used to be able to create over a long period of time. Would you agree with that a little bit, or what's your take on that one?
Absolutely. You know, I think back to the players, you know, the Q Morrisons, the Sarah Ashley Barkers, the Gabby Connolly's, like the players who I recruited, Mackenzie Ingram as an assistant coach and a head coach. And same thing, those relationships go back 2-3 years before they ever show up on campus. And so when they get to campus, we've already got trust established. We've got a relationship established, and they're ready at that point to jump off the roof or run through a wall because they know you're not going to tell them to do anything that's not going to be for their greater good. And when you now look at the portal, you have a window of a week or 2 weeks or a month to get to know someone and decide if they should be a part of your program or not. And that's hard for me. That's really hard for me. And so that's been one of the areas where I've really had to adjust. And I still have put some rules around that, you know, in terms of how we recruit the portal. I think the other thing that it scares me for our young people is I didn't play much as a freshman. Right. But there was some resilience in that, and there was some stick-to-itiveness in that. And there was something said for me to come to practice every day and work my butt off and play really hard to perform, knowing I might not get a chance to play in the game. That helped me. You know, that helped me have some longevity. That helped me have some investment. That helped me get through some tough times, like to know that I can handle some hard things. And even though I don't see the results that I want right now, I had a great career at Alabama. And I stuck with it. And I worry that our young people, with their ability to jump in the portal, not just once, but 2, 3, 4 times, like what does that do for them when their playing days are over and they have to learn how to stick with a job or stick in a marriage or whatever, fill in the blank however you want to. I worry they're not going to have those skills to do that. And I also look at some players who have transferred 4 times, and I wonder, like, what alumni weekend are you going to attend? Like, seriously, like, what program are you going to feel a part of? And I'm not saying that the portal's all bad. We've benefited from the portal greatly, and there is a place for young students to go into the portal. But I think there's some young people who now are half in, half out before they ever show up to your campus. Well, if it doesn't work, I'll just go in the portal. There is no, I'm in this for the long haul. Me transferring was never an option. All my days at Alabama weren't great days, but me leaving was never an option. And I think it's just too readily available. And so what habits are we teaching our young people long-term what is something that really concerns me.
Corey Close at UCLA, we've talked about Corey. She went to the Final Four this year, and I think had six girls, go in the portal. And I think she might even have mentioned they went into the portal like the next day, when they got home. And you're talking about, now for me, I would have a hard time not taking that personal. I know it's not personal because kids nowadays, most time it's really not personal towards the coach. They're just looking for a better opportunity, or hey, I can play there, or I'm not happy with this over here. And but for me, when I had players go early in the draft or transfer, like it hurt me, like it hurt my heart, because I wanted that relationship no matter what, forever. And I don't know if that's something you kind of have to just get past nowadays. Like, hey, you can't take it personal. It's just part of the landscape, I would imagine, in today's college athletics.
It's really hard, though. If you are someone who cares about the young people who you are, leading and responsible for, it's hard. It gets gotten a little bit easier, but I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I feel like relationships are my superpower. And so if that's not part of our process, then where does that leave us? And so, yes, I have gotten better about not taking it personally, because that is a landscape that we're in. And when you look across the country in any sport on the men or women's side and see how players are going into the portal, it's an understanding of, okay, this is where we are. It is not personal, but that still doesn't mean it doesn't hurt or you don't process it that way for a little bit, because that just means you care. And it means you're invested in those young people. And when you bring them into your program, you're making a commitment to them, and you want the same commitment made back to you. And so when that doesn't happen, unless it's mutually agreed or that they are going to have a better opportunity somewhere else, it does sting.
It does. It's hard. Joni, have you ever considered, is the WNBA, is that a part of your future? Is there something about that with, because that league is growing, it's becoming more popular. People are paying attention. I live in Newport Beach. I play pickleball, and I'll go in there and a couple guys, they're talking about the WNBA game, which, 10 years ago, I'm not sure, people were talking about it very much, but it is growing. And, I think you're, probably one of the best there is in the whole country. I mean, is that something for you that maybe, hey, I look at that, or what's your take on that?
We'll see. I never want to say no to that. Right now, I still feel like my calling is at the college level. I still feel like I have the chance to shape young lives and be a role model for them, and to be the vessel and the instrument to help them live out their dreams. I think the other thing for me is I kind of get a chance to do that with USA Basketball. And I also, up until a month ago when I hired my husband on my staff, Darius worked for Don Staley at South Carolina when we were both assistant coaches. And then when I got the Georgia job, he got out of the business because he was like, there's no way I can stay at South Carolina and you're the head coach at Georgia. And he got into the W. So when we were in Athens, he worked for the Atlanta Dream as a coach and spent some time as an interim head coach and as a GM. And then when we made the move to Texas, he had the opportunity to become the general manager for the Connecticut Sun. And so he's been the GM for the Connecticut Sun the last 3 years. And so I still get a heavy dose of the W, not just from watching it and following our players, but living it with him. And so I think I get my fix that way. And so for now, that is not something that I feel like I'm being called to do. Who knows what the future holds, but for me, I still feel like my calling and space and purpose is at the college level.
Mm-hmm. Joni, when the time comes and you got a lot of coaching left into you, a lot of years, if you want to, obviously, you're really good and you've established yourself really well. But if you were to look ahead in 15 years, or whenever that time comes, or 20 years, or who knows when, 10 years, and you come to the end, and I'm at a place now where I'm 61 years old, and I could coach, but I've probably chosen not to right now. But if you were to put yourself ahead and then look back, what are some of the things you would hope that you leave as a legacy behind you as you hopefully end an amazing career at some point way out in the future?
Yeah. Not in any particular order. I hope that the players and coaches that I've worked for would be able to say that I was very neutral. I was. You knew what you were going to get from me every day. I was steady in the things that I did and how I operated. I taught our young people that basketball is what you do and it's not who you are. That I cared about them as a person before being a player. That we were teams that were tough and competitive and won championships. And that she's somebody who you can pick up the phone and call right now, and she's going to answer the phone and be there for you. Those are the things that I think our players do say. I think our former players say. And if I continue to do what I'm supposed to do, I hope that's what will continue to be said about me. Fierce competitor, loyal, but there's a priority in a way of how she operates that lets everybody know who is like leading her life.
That's powerful, Joni. And, kind of as we close, I want to say to you, like I said before, I have watched every step of the way. I've followed you every step of your journey, and couldn't be more proud, to be honest, of, watching you go from, a player and transitioning into coaching, and then the steps. And like I said earlier, Joni, I do believe that, you're good at what you do, but, I think people, they understand who you are. And to me, winning is fun. Winning's important. We all want to win. We're all competitive, but I think at the end of the day, what will always stand out about you, Joni, is who you really are at your core. And that's why you're an attractor of people. People want to be around that, and they trust you. And so anyway, biggest fan. I love you. And I think that you are special. And I'm so thankful that you took some time. I know you're extremely busy. You guys are out recruiting, doing all the things you have to do. So thank you for being on the show today. It's been really, really fun for me.